There's a case tucked in the back corner of a tackle museum down in the Ozarks, and the folks who run that place don't let just anybody near it. Behind that glass sit 5 reels that a working angler once tied to a cane pole for pocket change. And these days, a collector with deep pockets would hand over a truck payment just to hold one. Not fish with it. Hold it. Y'all, this ain't a story about rods and line. This is a story about hands. The men who shaped brass and hard rubber into something that could sing when a bass took a lure, and how the world moved on and left their work behind on a velvet cushion instead of a tackle box. Grab a rocking chair, pour something cold, because we're counting down the 5 reels that went from bait shop pegboards to museum pedestals. And the last one on this list has a story that'll sit with you a good long while. Kicking off this countdown, we head to a shop floor that clattered with gears and stamped metal, where the Bronson Reel Company set up in the early part of the last century. These reels found their way into the palms of everyday folks from the bayous of Louisiana up through the trout streams of Appalachia. They weren't fancy. They were the kind of gear a father handed down to a son with a nod and not much else said because nothing else needed saying. What set the Bronson apart was the free spool mechanism, a piece of engineering that let a bait sail out further and truer than most of its rivals could manage at the time. Bass fishermen swore by it. Crappie chasers kept one in every tackle box they owned. And for a stretch of decades, if you walked into a bait shop from Georgia to Missouri, a Bronson sat on the shelf next to the crickets and the cane poles. Companies get bought, factories change hands, and somewhere along the way, Bronson's name got folded into a bigger outfit, and the line quietly went silent. No farewell tour, no last catalog run with a bow on it. One year they were making reels, the next year the tooling sat cold. These days, a Bronson in working shape with its original box will fetch real money at estate sales and auction houses that specialize in old tackle. Museums that trace the history of American angling keep one on hand, not because it's the rarest thing ever stamped from brass, but because it tells the story of the ordinary fisherman, the one who didn't have money for the fancy imported gear, but still wanted something that ran smooth on a Saturday morning. Down on the Jersey Shore, before the boardwalks got loud with arcade lights, a company by the name of Ocean City was turning out reels meant for saltwater and stubborn fish. Their gear had a reputation for holding up against tarpon runs and stripers that fought like they had something personal against the angler holding the rod. Ocean City reels carried a heft to them. Real brass gearing, leather drag washers, the kind of build that a boat captain trusted when a marlin decided the fight wasn't over. Sport fishermen chasing big game off the Atlantic coast leaned on this brand for years, and their surf reels became a fixture up and down the eastern seaboard. The trouble came the way it usually comes. Cheaper materials entered the market. Plastics and lighter alloys started winning over anglers who wanted gear that weighed less on a long day at sea, and Ocean City's heavier, old-world construction fell out of favor. The factory doors shut, the molds got scrapped or sold off, and for a long stretch, these reels sat forgotten in tackle boxes in attics up and down the coast. Then the collecting world caught wind of what they'd lost. Maritime museums along the Northeast started hunting down surviving Ocean City reels, restoring the leather washers, polishing the brass back to a shine it hadn't seen since Eisenhower was in office. A well-preserved surf reel from this maker now sits in glass cases from Cape May up to Cape Cod, a reminder of when saltwater tackle was built heavy enough to survive a hurricane and a grandson's inheritance both. Landing at the middle of this countdown, we travel inland to Indiana, where the South Bend Bait Company built a name for itself making lures before it ever turned its attention to reels. When they finally did put their hand to reel making, the result carried the same fussy attention that made their lures legendary among bass fishermen. South Bend reels had a certain grace to the click of the drag, a sound old-timers describe with a kind of reverence usually saved for church hymns. The company understood something a lot of manufacturers missed. A reel isn't only a tool, it's the thing a man holds in his hand for hours at a time, and it ought to feel right doing it. Bass tournaments back in the mid-century relied on South Bend gear, and country stores from the Carolinas to the Ozarks stocked their reels alongside their famous bass or Reno lures. For a generation of southern and midwestern anglers, a South Bend reel was the first serious piece of tackle a boy ever owned, usually gifted for a birthday or handed over after a first successful trip to the lake. Corporate mergers and shifting ownership eventually swallowed the brand whole, and reel production stopped while the lure side of the business limped along under different owners for a while longer. What's left of the original South Bend reels now lives mostly in private collections and regional fishing museums scattered across the Midwest, each one a small monument to a company that understood the soul of a tackle box better than most. Second on our countdown, and we're stepping back further than most folks realize American fishing tackle even goes. Before factories, before catalogs, a small circle of gunsmiths in Kentucky started applying watchmaker precision to fishing reels, and out of that tradition came what collectors and historians now call the Kentucky reel. Makers with names like Meek and Milam worked by hand, cutting gears with the same tools they used on rifle mechanisms, fitting brass housings so tight a reel could run for a lifetime without a hiccup. These weren't mass-produced. A single craftsman might turn out only a handful of reels in a year, each one slightly different from the last because no two were stamped from the same mold. There was no mold.